What if Amelia Earhart's disappearance wasn't a tragic accident, but a meticulously planned cover-up? After nearly a century, a deep-sea search team claims to have found her missing plane, but the pieces still don't quite fit. For almost 90 years, have we been fed a carefully crafted lie, shielding a truth too shocking to reveal? In this video, we'll peel back the layers of a legend, uncovering strange clues, hidden reports, and the powerful forces that may have buried the real story. Get ready, because what you're about to hear could rewrite history. In 1928, Amelia Earhart became a global sensation, celebrated as the first woman to cross the Atlantic by air. Headlines screamed "pioneer," and crowds cheered her as a hero. Yet, beneath the accolades, Amelia felt like an imposter. "I was just baggage, like a sack of potatoes," she confessed to reporters, admitting she couldn't even fly that particular plane. Still, the world adored her, calling her Lady Lindy, the female Charles Lindbergh. Amelia smiled for the cameras, waved from balconies, and flew borrowed planes swept up in a whirlwind publicity machine. This machine, designed by her soon-to-be husband, George Putnam, was relentless. Behind the scenes, Amelia battled a sinking feeling that she didn't deserve any of it, but she rode the wave. Putnam lined up lectures, slapped her face on luggage ads, and even published her book. Amelia had a vision beyond mere celebrity, and disappointing Putnam could derail everything. Then, a deal with McCall's magazine provided some income, but it wasn't enough. She needed more. With her consent, Putnam sold her image to Lucky Strike cigarettes. The press caught wind, and McCall's pulled a major feature. Respectable women simply didn't endorse tobacco. Amelia wanted the money to support Richard Evelyn Byrd's South Pole expedition, a grand gesture that required her to remain fiercely visible in the flying community. She was done being the passenger. Amelia had made a silent promise. She would be the first woman to achieve amazing things in aviation, starting with several solo flights. Just months after the media dubbed her Lady Lindy, she finally took the controls alone. Once she did, there was no stopping her. In August 1928, she flew solo across North America and back, etching her name into history on her own terms. No co-pilots, just raw determination. She was still sharpening her skills, yet top aviators recognized her innate talent. Then came her ultimate test. In 1929, Amelia joined the inaugural Women's Air Derby, a grueling race from California to Ohio. Dubbed the Powder Puff Derby by Will Rogers, it was anything but cute. This brutal race pushed 20 women through engine failures, terrifying crashes. Even Amelia's friend Ruth Nichols flipped her plane after hitting a tractor. Amelia pressed on, securing third place in the heavy plane division. This wasn't just a victory, it was a profound declaration that her celebrity wasn't hollow. She possessed the skill, the grit, to stand among the best aviators alive. More than that, Amelia saw her success as clearing runways for women everywhere. After the Derby, she gathered her fellow female pilots and founded the Nainuns, an organization dedicated to moral support and promoting women in aviation. She became its first president in 1930, marking just the beginning of her fierce advocacy. Her flying prowess and Putnam's relentless publicity transformed her from a celebrity into a living legend. Women devoured her fashion lines, clamored to wear her dresses, and longed to emulate her audacious spirit. Businesses clamored for her endorsement. Her initials, AE, became a powerful symbol. Yet, Amelia never lost focus. Her mind remained fixated on one goal: to fly, to champion aviation, to elevate women as capable pilots, and to normalize air travel for everyone. So, when she took a position as associate editor at Cosmopolitan, she leveraged it to advocate for aviation's acceptance and to empower aspiring female pilots. Her efforts caught the eye of Transcontinental Air Transport, who appointed her in 1929 to promote air travel for women. Then, Ludington Airline hired her to help establish the first regional shuttle service between New York and Washington, D.C. Aviation companies couldn't get enough of her. National Airways appointed her vice president. Her influence in the flying industry soared, culminating in her becoming an official in the National Aeronautic Association in 1930. She championed a special category for women's speed and altitude records, even persuading the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale to recognize female records globally. And she wasn't just setting records, she was smashing them. In 1931, she soared to a world altitude record of 18,415 feet in a Pitcairn autogyro, a bizarre hybrid of helicopter and airplane. The machine wasn't even hers. A chewing gum company loaned it to her, but Amelia made it dance in the skies. But it wasn't just the skies she challenged. Around this time, her marriage, a union that would surprisingly become entangled in her eventual disappearance, began to take shape. Amelia Earhart didn't just defy gravity, she defied the rigid conventions of marriage. When she finally consented to marry her publicist, George Putnam, in 1931, it wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a calculated marriage of convenience. Putnam was a divorced, incredibly well-connected man, openly obsessed with amplifying Amelia's fame. Amelia knew this, and so, when he proposed to her 5 times, she shot him down. It wasn't her first rejection. She'd broken off another engagement in 1928. Eventually, she accepted Putnam's proposal, but even then, she dictated the terms. There would be no traditional vows, no blind loyalty. On the morning of their wedding, she handed him a letter that read more like a business contract than a love note. In it, she delivered a stark warning. "I cannot guarantee to endure at all times the confinement of even an attractive cage." She made it clear she would never take his name. When the press tried calling her Mrs. Putnam, she simply laughed. George, on the other hand, quickly learned he'd be known publicly as Mr. Earhart. Putnam wasn't merely her husband, he was her manager, her publicist, and the architect behind many of her lucrative endorsement deals, granting him intimate knowledge of her substantial earnings. Critics whispered that he saw dollar signs, where others saw a pioneering woman chasing the horizon. Amelia made it clear she didn't want him as her business partner. But George wasn't about to loosen his grip so easily. He waited. This unsettling dynamic forces us to wonder. When Amelia vanished during her final flight around the world, was it truly just an aviation tragedy? Or was there something darker, something more deliberate, lurking behind the scenes? Amelia's ultimate goal wasn't to be a wife, but to seize the moment she'd been chasing since that infamous potato sack ride across the Atlantic. On May 20th, 1932, she took off from Harbor Grace, Newfoundland in her single-engine Lockheed Vega 5B with one burning purpose: to fly solo, non-stop across the Atlantic to Paris, just as Lindbergh had done 5 years prior. She didn't want to be Lady Lindy anymore. She wanted to be Amelia Earhart, the woman who accomplished what most people couldn't even dream of. The conditions were brutal, but Amelia was tougher. She battled freezing winds, mechanical failures, and crushing darkness for 14 hours and 56 minutes. Mechanical failures forced her to alter course, landing not in Paris, but in a quiet farmland in Northern Ireland. A farmhand, Cecil King, and T. Sawyer witnessed her descent. When asked how far she'd flown, Amelia, brimming with a pride she hadn't felt since 1928, looked him square in the eye and simply said, "From America." With that one sentence, she obliterated the shadow of doubt that had haunted her. She was now the first woman to fly solo, non-stop across the Atlantic, no longer a passenger. That flight earned her the Distinguished Flying Cross, France's Legion of Honor, and the Gold Medal from the National Geographic Society. Yet, even as she shook hands with President Hoover, penned books, and dined with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, Amelia remained restless. She had a new, audacious ambition. Despite this monumental achievement and renewed fame, she remained a fierce advocate for female pilots. When the 1934 Bendix Trophy race controversially banned women, Earhart famously refused to fly screen actor Mary Pickford to Cleveland for the race's opening. Amelia continued to dare to be different, even with the ever-present specter of death hanging over her head. In 1935, using a Lockheed 5C Vega, she became the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to California, a route so treacherous it had already claimed several pilots' lives. People called her crazy, but Amelia simply saw it as another challenge to conquer. That success fueled her next flights, solo from Los Angeles to Mexico City, then Mexico to New York. She set yet another record, crossing another line off her flying list, but it still wasn't enough. There was something Amelia was dying to do. She had set countless aviation records, forged an identity around fearless flying, but Amelia was already conceptualizing her next, grandest adventure. She wanted to achieve what no man or woman had ever done, to fly around the world, taking the longest, most perilous route, a staggering 29,000 miles. Amelia Earhart wanted to be the absolute best pilot there was. By early 1936, Amelia Earhart began meticulously planning her daring 29,000-mile global circumnavigation. It was a monumental risk, but she was convinced she would succeed. a significant boost came from Purdue University, which established the Amelia Earhart Fund for Aeronautical Research and provided a crucial $50,000 to purchase a Lockheed Electra 10E airplane for her. In July 1936, Lockheed Aircraft Company completed the aircraft, fitting it with additional fuel tanks and extensive modifications. Earhart affectionately nicknamed her plane the Flying Laboratory, believing it would carry her into aviation history. Now, she needed the right crew. She chose Harry Manning, a seasoned navigator and captain of the SS President Roosevelt. Manning wasn't just a pilot, he was a master of Morse code, a vital skill, especially when primary radio communication inevitably failed. This ability to communicate across vast, silent oceans could mean the difference between a safe landing and being lost forever. However, Manning's position came under immediate fire from Amelia's husband, George Putnam, following a seemingly minor error Manning made during a test flight. During that particular flight, Amelia and Putnam knew the landmarks, but Manning relied solely on the plane's navigation device, leading them slightly off course into a different state. Then, in a truly bizarre move, Putnam decided to test Manning in a late-night flight under terrible weather conditions without Amelia present. Despite the treacherous circumstances, Manning was only 20 miles off target, a margin well within acceptable limits for the era. But strangely, Putnam reacted as if it were a catastrophic disaster. Why? Why would he push out a reliable, indispensable navigator over the slightest perceived error? Putnam wasn't alone in his skepticism. Hollywood stunt pilot Paul Mance, who had established a flying school business with Amelia, also insisted Manning had to go. But Manning was the only person on the team who truly understood Morse code. Without him, the crew's ability to communicate over long distances was catastrophically crippled. What was initially planned as a two-person flight team suddenly ballooned into a three-person crew: Amelia, Manning, and Noonan. On March 17, 1937, the first attempt at the world flight began. They flew from California to Hawaii when disaster struck. A non-fatal crash damaged the plane, and its propellers now had serious problems. The Flying Laboratory was taken to the U.S. Navy's Luke Field facility at Pearl Harbor for urgent servicing. When the flight resumed 3 days later, the plane practically disintegrated mid-run. The forward landing gear collapsed, both propellers hit the ground, and the plane dragged violently on its belly. The exact cause of the crash remains shrouded in mystery, but some witnesses at Luke Field, including an Associated Press journalist, claimed they saw a tire blow. Amelia herself suspected the same, but her business partner Mance, along with others, shockingly laid the blame squarely on her. The Flying Laboratory was now utterly destroyed and had to be shipped back to Lockheed in Burbank, California, for extensive, costly repairs. Why did Mance so quickly blame Amelia for the crash? Was she truly at fault? Or was it a calculated attempt to make her appear careless, perhaps even desperate for the flight? Lockheed eventually finished fixing the plane. However, this time, only 2 people remained to continue the harrowing journey. Amelia and Noonan were ready to go, but Manning, the critical Morse code expert, abruptly decided to quit. So, for the final, most dangerous leg, they had no Morse code expert. And there was another, far more insidious problem. Amelia didn't fully understand the new communication system Lockheed had installed in the plane. She'd been given a brief tutorial, but it wasn't enough. Her focus was solely on flying. If Manning had been present, his expertise could have easily bridged the gap in understanding the new communication method. Perhaps, just perhaps, if he had been there, what happened next wouldn't have. By June 29, 1937, Amelia and navigator Fred Noonan had already traversed over 22,000 miles, crossing South America, Africa, the vast Indian Ocean, and Southeast Asia. They landed in Lae, New Guinea, with only one final terrifying stretch remaining: 7,000 miles across the Pacific. The hardest parts of the journey were supposedly behind them. This was meant to be the triumphant final lap, a victorious return to the States. But it wasn't. She was scheduled to land on Howland Island to refuel, and the United States Coast Guard were awaiting her arrival. They dispatched the cutter Itasca to the island to provide vital navigation support for Amelia's approach. However, a problem no one could have anticipated began to unfold. By July 2nd, Amelia had been sending routine reports to the Itasca, but suddenly, the communication deteriorated. The Itasca struggled to connect with Amelia's plane on her frequency, and she, unfamiliar with the new, complex radio system, couldn't make the necessary adjustments to connect with them. She continued to send increasingly desperate transmissions, begging for guidance, but they couldn't establish a reliable connection. So the Itasca began sending Morse code, their desperate attempt to guide her. But Amelia simply didn't understand Morse well enough to use it effectively. She pleaded for voice transmissions, while the Itasca continued to tap out Morse, their messages never truly connecting. At that critical moment, when she was circling nearby, agonizingly close and desperately needing a heading to find the tiny island, the entire system utterly failed her. She could hear them, faint and breaking, but she couldn't find them. And then came silence. She was close, painfully close. According to some harrowing accounts, the Electra may have passed within a mere 50 to 100 miles of Howland Island. The endless, hungry blue of the Pacific simply swallowed her. An official search was immediately launched and lasted until July 19th, covering thousands of square miles in what became the most expensive and extensive mission of its time. But it was too late. There was no wreckage, just the vast, indifferent expanse of the Pacific. In the anxious days that followed, amateur radio operators across the world claimed they heard faint distress calls from Earhart. Some even believed she was tapping out Morse code from a deserted island, but these signals were maddeningly inconsistent, unconfirmed, and quickly drowned out by a cacophony of hoaxes and chaotic confusion. Her husband, George Putnam, also launched his own private search, but it too yielded nothing. Then, in 1939, he approached the court, not for continued search efforts, but for Amelia to be declared legally dead, requesting that the standard 7-year waiting period be waived. This would allow him to swiftly manage Earhart's considerable finances. As a result, Amelia Earhart was declared legally dead on January 5, 1939. Did Putnam know something he wasn't telling? Some people believe he might have, while others are convinced the United States government definitively did. But higher-ups orchestrated a massive cover-up. Their shocking theory, Amelia was a covert United States spy, using her circumglobal flight as a sophisticated cover to gather intelligence for the U.S. locals from the remote Marshall Islands, claimed they saw Amelia and Noonan alive and in Japanese custody, a chilling account that seemed to gain momentum in a 2017 documentary. In 2017, a History Channel documentary dropped a bombshell. A grainy, black-and-white photograph, unearthed from the U.S. National Archives, appeared to show Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan alive, sitting on a dock in the Marshall Islands. Just behind them, what looked like a Japanese ship towing what undeniably resembled her Lockheed Electra. Proponents of the spy theory claimed this was undeniable proof. They survived the crash, were captured by the Japanese, and the Marshall Island locals were right all along. The History Channel quickly pulled the documentary, but the damage was already done. The idea that Earhart may have been on a secret spy mission for the U.S. still lingers, a haunting whisper of betrayal. Some high-ranking military veterans have even publicly supported that theory, giving it an unnerving credibility. Yet, critics swiftly debunked the photo, claiming it was of a different woman and a different ship. A curious speed to dismiss such compelling evidence, leaving many to wonder if this was a deliberate effort to keep the truth buried. So, was she a heroic pilot lost at sea? A victim of her own daring ambition and a flawed communication system? Or was she a covert operative, shockingly abandoned by her own country, her disappearance meticulously concealed? What truly happened to her? In 2024, nearly 90 years since the event, the answer to this ever-living question seemed, for a moment, to be finally within reach. A former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer turned deep-sea explorer, Tony Romeo, just dropped what could be the biggest revelation in this enduring mystery. Tony made an incredible gamble, selling his entire real estate empire to fund an $11 million expedition into the vast, unforgiving Pacific Ocean. He believed he could find what generations of governments, explorers, and conspiracy theorists couldn't: Earhart's lost plane. And now, he claims he has. Using a high-tech underwater drone, Romeo and his company, Deep Sea Vision, meticulously scanned more than 5,000 square miles of ocean floor near Howland Island, precisely where Amelia was last heard from in 1937. Then, it happened. They picked up a sonar image, which they claim looked exactly like a plane. 2 engines, a distinctive twin tail, and a silhouette that matches the Lockheed 10E Electra down to the smallest detail. And here's the truly chilling part. It was found over 16,000 feet below the surface, almost 100 miles off course, right where absolutely nobody thought to look. Romeo is convinced, his belief unwavering. But experts, ever cautious, aren't so quick to agree. They claim what he saw was merely a geological formation, just another rock on the ocean floor. But Romeo is determined to prove them wrong, to silence the skeptics and bring definitive closure to history's most baffling aviation mystery. He and his team are already meticulously planning a return expedition, a monumental undertaking to confirm if this truly is the final resting place of Amelia Earhart. What will he find? And will it finally unearth the complete, unvarnished truth, or merely deepen the layers of this captivating, unnerving enigma? The ocean keeps its secrets well, but perhaps, just perhaps, not forever.